The woman gripped her phone firmly. Ass spoke sternly to the police. "I'm telling you, there's a black kid causing trouble in my yard." Soon flashing lights lit up the quiet street. The sound off sirens echoed, cutting through the calm of the afternoon. In the middle of it all stood Ethan Carter, a 12-year-old boy standing next to a police car. His face was pale, his hands trembling around Hema. Small crowd had gathered, their whispers filling the air. This was how it all began. Ethan, a bright, polite boy, had just moved into the neighborhood with his mom, loved basketball, and you could often find him outside dribbling and practicing his shots. That's exactly what he was doing when it happened. The basketball bounced out of his driveway and rolled across the street. Ethan followed it, laughing as it came to a stop in a neighbor's yard. It wasn't a big deal, or at least that's what he thought. He walked to the edge of the yard and called out, "Hello, excuse me, meatballs here," but no one answered. Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to cause any trouble, so he looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching him. No one came out. He stepped into the yard to grab his ball. What Ethan didn't know was that someone was watching. Karen Thompson stood at her window, her eyes fixed on him. To her, it wasn't just a boy getting a ball. It was something else entirely. Karen frowned, her mind racing with assumptions. Who is this kid? She thought. Why is he in my yard? Without waiting to find out, she picked up her phone and dialed, "Hello, police. There's a black kid causing trouble in my yard," she said, her voice steady but sharp-hued. "Suspicious. Can you send someone right away?" By the time Ethan picked up his ball and started walking back, he heard something that made him stop. Sirens, loud and close. Ethan turned and saw a patrol car pulling up. To officers stepped out, their faces serious for a moment. He didn't understand what was happening. Why were they here? The officers walked up to him, their voice calm but firm. "What are you doing, Harrison?" one of them asked. Ethan clutched his basketball tighter. I just came to get me ball," he said softly before he could say more. Karen stepped outside. She pointed at him, her voice louder. "Now that's him. He's been snooping around here all day. Don't care what he says. That boy doesn't belong in this neighborhood." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. One of them turned to Ethan's son. He said calmly, "Is that true? Were you trespassing?" Ethan looked down at his basketball, his voice barely a whisper. "I wasn't trespassing," he said. "I was just getting my ball." It rolled into her yard. Karen folded her arms tightly, her voice sharp and cutting. "Go." "Sure," she snapped. "That's what they always say. It starts with a ball, and before you know it, they're scoping out houses, looking for something to stealth." Weight of her words hit Ethan hard. His eyes darted nervously to the officers, to the crowd, and back to Karen. Ethan's chest tightened. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. He felt the eyes of the officers on him, the eyes of neighbors speaking through windows, watching from porches. "Why didn't you stay in your own yard?" the officer asked. Ethan Blinkett confessed. By the question, he felt thweety of every gaze on him, waiting for him to say the wrong thing. Karen folded her arms, her face smug. "I told you," she said. To the officers, "I knew he was up to something." But Ethan wasn't up to anything. He was just a boy with a basketball, and now he was being treated like a criminal. The officer, unsure of what to do but pressured by Karen's insistence, made a choice. He told Ethany would need to come with him for questioning. Ethan didn't resist. He didn't argue, but his voice shook as he asked, "For one thing, can I call my mom?" What Karen didn't know, what the officer did know, was that Ethan's mother wasn't just any parent. She was Governor Lisa Carter, the most powerful woman in the state. Everything she needed to know. She didn't hesitate. Shamad, one call, then another, and within minutes, her convoy was speeding toward the Nagurd. The sirens began, not one, not two, a whole fleet of black subs barreled down the streetlights, flashing, roaring. Karen turned to look, her face twisting in confusion. She had no idea what was coming, and she was a buto. Find out. Do you enjoy this story? Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more. Karen Thompson, still standing near her yard, turned toward the sound. Confusion flickered across her face. What could this be? Why so many vehicles, and what were they here for? As the convoy roletto a stop, the door swung open, and out stepped Governor Lisa Carter. She didn't hesitate. Her presence alone demanded attention. Everyone knew how she was, but imagine Karen's shocks thought she was dealing with a simple case of trespassing. How could she have known that the boy she accused was the son of the state's most powerful woman? Lisa's gaze swept over every one of the officers, the neighbors. Karen Anthen stopped on Ethan. She studied him for a moment, Her expression unreal. Finally she spoke. Her voice was calm but carried an edge that cut through the tension. Like a knife. What's happening? Here the officer ceased it. One of them cleared his throat, glancing nervously at Karen. Governor Carter, he said respectfully. Wooer called here for a report of suspicious activity. This young man was seen on private property. Lisa raised an eyebrow, her attention shifting to Karen. You made this report? She asked. Karen, still struggling to regain her composure, nodded quickly. Yes, she said, her voice sequier than before. I saw him admired. I didn't know who he was or what he was doing, so I called the police ethot. I thought it was the right thing to do. Lisa didn't respond immediately. Let the silence hang in the air, her eyes never leaving Karen. Then she turned it back to the officers and said, This is Ethan Carter, my son, and what evidence do you have to suggest he was doing anything suspicious? She asked. The officers glanced at each other, again clearly uncomfortable. Lisa's gaze softened slightly as she looked at Ethan, gave him a small nod before turning back to Karen. So she said slowly, a 12-year-old boy retrieves a basketball and your first instinct is to call the police, Karen sputtered, her hands tightening into fists. I didn't know who was, she said defensively. He could have been anyone, and kids like him needn't just wander into yards without areas. And Lisa's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped lower, sharper. Kids like him. She repeated, What exactly does that mean? The tension in the air thickened. Looked at each other uneasily. Weight of Lisa's words, sinking in Ukaren, stammered her earlier confidence in complete deligan. Lisa stepped closer, her voice commanding. Let me be very clear, she said. You called the police on a child. You accused him without evidence, and now you stand here trying to justify it with assumptions that say far more about you than they do about him. You should be arrested. The crowd stood in stunned silence, the truth of the moment sinking in. Click on the subscribe button if you believe justice should never depend on the color of your skin. Lisa turned to tough officers. I want this resolved, she said firmly, and I want it done the right way. My son deserves better than this. The officers nodded quickly, their professionalism returning. Karen Fillingish replied, I'm sorry, Governor Carter. Lisa stood turning back to the officer, and Karen, her voice was steady, deliberate. This isn't just about my son, she said. This is about every child who's been made to feel like they don't belong. A very parent who's had to wonder if their child will make it home safely. The crowd that had gathered watched insolence. For some, this was a moment of realization, a mirror held up to their own biases. For others, it was a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. Then the governor addressed the crowd. She spoke not as a politician, but as a mother. She talked about fear, about prejudice, about the importance of seeing on another as human beings. First, her words were simple but powerful. We all have a responsibility to ourselves, to our neighbors, to the children who will inherit this world. Let's make it one where they feel safe, where they feel valued. Lisa turned back to Karen. One last time. Her voice was calm, but her words carried the weight of a promise. Think carefully before you make assumptions like this again, because next time, it won't end here. Karen's face fell, her earlier bravado completely gone, and Felicia. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning to changing a mindset, a community, and making sure no other have to endure what Ethan just did. Bet the impact wasn't undeniable. Karen Thompson, once so confident in her place in the community, found herself increasingly isolated. The shame of what she had done lingered in every interaction, every glance from her neighbor. Lisa reached out to the local community association, proposing a series of workshops and discussions about bios inclusion, IUS, and anti-accountability. Ethan, too, found a way to channel his experience with his mom's encouragement. He spoke about what had happened to him at a school assembly. I didn't understand why someone would think I was bad just because of the way I look, he said, but now I know we have toasted up to that. We have to be better. What had started as a single incident to basketball, rolling into the wrong yard, Beckham, a moment of reckoning for an entire community. Karen Thompson learned a painful lesson about the consequence of her actions, one that would stay with her long after the flashing lights and whispers faded, and Lisa Carter shook up to fight not just as a governor, but as a mother, a neighbor, and a voice for those who often went unheard. Bess. In the end, this wasn't just a story about one boy, one woman, or one neighborhood. It was a story about the power of truth, the courage to confront assumptions, and the hope that together we can create a world where everyone truly belongs. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Tosi, more interesting videos.